And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome back to the show our friend Congressman Khanna, a Democrat representing California's 17th district in the heart of Silicon Valley, serves in the House Armed Services Committee and Oversight and Accountability Committee. Congressman Khanna, nice to see you, my friend. Thanks for being on.
Always love coming on, Dean. Thank you for inviting
So,
me back.
sure, of course. So, recently you were all over the country, but recently you were in Michigan. You met with Arab and Muslim leaders. I saw some powerful quotes about what you had heard and what you were sharing to people. What can you share with people about the intensity and the passion and the pain that you experienced hearing people from the community talking about Gaza?
First of all, this is not a political issue in an electoral politics sense. This is a humanitarian crisis. What people were sharing is grief, loss, unimaginable pain, stories of families who have lost 3 generations. And I think when you go to Dearborn, what struck me most is how immediate that pain is, how connected folks are to people in Gaza, in the West Bank, and how shaped their political activism is with the cause against occupation. I mean, some of the elected officials, Abdul Saeed, who ran for Michigan's governor, Abdullah, who's an incredible mayor of Dearborn, said their first political memories were at 4, 5, 7, going to a rally for justice of a Palestinian state in a way that the anti-apartheid movement maybe shaped Barack Obama. So I think this is a narrative. I spent a little time on it, Dean, because I don't think it's known to as many people in America or the Democratic Party as it needs to be, how formative this issue is, not just, by the way, for Muslim and Arab Americans, but for many young people.
Yeah, and also, the issue has resonated with African Americans. I saw articles in the New York Times, the AME Church, one of the biggest black denominations, has called for not just a ceasefire, but pausing and withholding military aid to Netanyahu during the war. Before that, more than 1,000 black pastors sent a letter to President Biden saying for a ceasefire and work harder. And they had quotes in there saying things like, "We have not seen this level of emotion since the civil rights movement." And I've had callers to my show. There is a sense of people who are oppressed, and they see that in the Palestinians, and they feel a visceral connection, which to me has been remarkable and astonishing in a great way. I don't know if you've heard that, if you've talked to Black African Americans about the issue.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to Harlem Church on Sunday. Stephen Green, who has invited me because of my outspoken comments for human rights in Gaza and not giving Netanyahu a blank check. And I got this young pastor who organized a march on Washington for a ceasefire, said, "Will you come speak to my church?" Now, this should not be surprising to us. There's this brilliant town hall that Nelson Mandela has in the 1980s. You see in the audience a young Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. And Mandela is asked, "Why are you supporting Yasser Arafat?" And Mandela, in far more eloquent terms than me, says, "Arafat was there when the rest of the world wasn't, when we struggled against apartheid, and I don't desert my friends who support freedom. That would be moral cowardice." And the place erupts. And so the history of the both African-American civil rights movement and the broader struggles that South Africa, Mandela had in the Palestinian cause for a Palestinian state have been intertwined for decades.
Very, very well put. So what do you want to see? I mean, there's negotiations of a ceasefire. The reports today looks like it's not going to happen right away. Unfortunately, I thought it was going to happen, but maybe more like next week if they go back to talks. What would you like to see with our U.S. policy towards Gaza right now and the Palestinian people there? And of course, the security of the Israeli people as well.
Well, I'd like to see the president call for a permanent ceasefire and release of all hostages. I think we could get that deal. I think we could get all the hostages out on day one if the president gets Netanyahu to commit to a permanent ceasefire. Not let's stop for Ramadan and then start bombing Gaza after Ramadan is done, and have Netanyahu withdraw from Gaza. Those are two of the immediate aspects. But beyond that, I think he's got to make it clear to Netanyahu that the blank check is over. Netanyahu can't stand there in defiance of our defense secretary, in defiance of the president, and threaten to invade Rafah and then expect that we still will be sending him weapons. That's not how it works. He needs to say yes, sir, if he expects us to be shipping him weapons, not thumb his nose in insult to the American people and the American president. And I think President Biden needs to make it clear that Netanyahu is to the right of Trump, that Ben-Gvir is to the right of Stephen Miller, that what we are doing is not supporting Israel. Of course, people here support Israel, but they're supporting the most extreme form of right-wing governments, which we would never do here in the United States.
Certainly. And I was glad that President Biden, on odd form to do it, but on the Late Show with Seth Meyers last week, brought up Ben-Gvir. You know, I've talked about on the show, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's in the cabinet of Israel, and he's the sort of the Homeland Security Minister, was convicted in an Israeli court in 2007 of supporting terrorism against Arab Christians and Muslims. This is a man who was part of a terrorist movement, who is celebrated Baruch Goldstein, who's a horrific terrorist who slaughtered Palestinians praying in a mosque. And he is the guy that Netanyahu invited to be a part of his coalition. And it says a lot about Netanyahu. When this war is over, and at some point is going to be a cessation of violence, what is the U.S.'s role at that point?
Well, this is where I think the president needs to be a statesman and a peacemaker. And what we should do is take our Gulf allies up on their offer, take the Arab states up on their offer to have a massive summit about the future of Palestine and bring Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel there, have Palestinian civic leaders. And Dean, you know this, there's some brilliant municipal mayors there. There's some brilliant civic leaders there, totally unaffiliated with the PLA and with Hamas, and have them all be very broad and inclusion in there. And the United States then should do three things. First, we should recognize a Palestinian state. We still haven't bilaterally. Second, we should recognize Palestine in the UN. Under the Obama administration, Palestine got observer status. We voted against it, but allowed it to happen, but at least recognize them at the UN. And third, we should then work towards a state, and I think you'll get Gulf allies like UAE and Saudi saying, if you have a new government there, we will massively fund Gaza's redevelopment, and that will incentivize, I think, a new form of government to come. But here, Fareed Zakaria made a brilliant point, and he said, look, it's not just that there are 30,000 Hamas fighters and Israel has killed 6,000, you still have 24,000 fighters. Beyond not being able to fully just defeat this militarily, you have to understand, as you do, Dean, that Hamas is a political party. Hamas is a cultural movement. Hamas, basically, in Fareed Zakaria's words, represents the view that armed resistance is the only way for Palestinian justice. So that I reject that, but we have to provide an alternative. And if you want the security of the Israeli people, we need a Palestinian state.
And that's the hope. So hopefully we'll get to a ceasefire. I'm chatting with Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, 17th District. A couple of things I want to touch on. One is you proposed an anti-corruption plan, which I think is great. I think would get so broad-based support. Can you share a little bit about your political reform anti-corruption plan?
Thank you, Dean. Look, first, get rid of super PACs, get rid of PAC lobbyist money, get it all out of politics. And by the way, Dean, even if we can't do it for everyone in Congress, at least let's commit to getting it out of Democratic primaries. I mean, why can't we say no super PAC money in Democratic primaries? Second, stop members of Congress from trading stocks, have them be in a diversified trust. Third, term limits for Supreme Court justices and members of Congress. Fourth, let's make sure members of Congress can't go become lobbyists after they're done their time in Congress. And fifth, let's stop having lobbyists give money to members of Congress. We've got to get money's influence out of politics.
We absolutely do. We had on last week the head of End Citizens United and had a great conversation. It is, to me, one of the most corrosive things in politics is the idea of mass money being legally provided to politicians, where the charade we have to live that, like, my vote's as important as someone who gives $5 million to a candidate super PAC. No one's that dumb. We know that. Of course, you're going to support the person. You're going to hear them. You're going to give a meeting to the person giving $5 million to super PAC. You're not going to even listen to me. And if you do listen to me over the person that gave you $5 million, you're an idiot. That common sense says you should listen to that person.
Well, you got millions of followers, Dean. So you know, it balances out. But still,
right. But it's one of the most corrosive things. And it's one of the few things that people on the right and the left, we all agree on. So What prevents it? Is it just big money is being able to block the idea of getting rid of big money?
Well, look, there's an establishment party at both sides, and they benefited from the system. They benefit from the fundraising. They know the donors. And other folks are reformers who are trying to say the system isn't working. It's broken. And it's an uphill fight against the establishment, as Bernie Sanders found out 2 times. But the good news is we've got more progressives and reformers elected than ever before. The younger folks coming in are ready to change the system, and people want that.
They do. There's no doubt. It's, again, one of the few things that unites all Americans. Get rid of big money, except for billionaires. They like the big money. So last two things. So now it is clearly Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Not a surprise, but now it's after Super Tuesday, we can say the presumptive nominees of both parties there. From your point of view, what are the stakes for this 2024 election for us?
Well, they're enormous. I mean, they're enormous when it comes to abortion. They're enormous when it comes to gun violence. They're enormous when it comes to voting rights. They're enormous when it comes to basic institutions of democracy. I mean, you could have Donald Trump firing people left and right at the Justice Department, the State Department, in agencies. And they're enormous even when it comes to the issue of Middle East peace. I mean, I think Trump would just give an even further blank check to Netanyahu, which is why I'm out there working very, very hard for the president. But while I'm in Michigan, I'm basically saying the president is wrong. Literally, I said the president's policy on Gaza is mistaken. And this is what I appreciate and respect about the president, is that he has people on his team, like me, at least for now. I haven't heard that I'm off the team, who are very critical on certain aspects of the president. And that gives me hope that we can influence and push change. And the fact that he and the vice president at least are now using the word ceasefire, which used to be taboo in this town, shows that.
Yeah, Vice President Harris's speech, and I played some of it from Selma over the weekend, was great. And not only calling for the immediate ceasefire, of course, the release of the hostages, but also talk about Palestinian humanity, self-determination, dignity, freedom, which is vitally important. So tonight is President Biden's State of the Union, probably the most important of his presidency because it's an election year. What do you hope to hear besides heckling from the Republicans, which I think we're all going to, I assume that's going to happen. I'm sure President Biden's ready with some lines, but what would you like to hear tonight?
I'd like him to put forward a forward-looking vision for the country. Where are we going to go for 4 years? Where is America headed? Where's the economy headed with globalization, technology, and how are we going to make sure that ordinary Americans, young Americans, working-class Americans have a place in it and have a shot at the American dream? And what is our agenda for the next 4 years? Tell that story. And then I'd like to have him make some bold statements on ending this war in Gaza and coming out as a peacemaker, and a vision for what he will do and how he will use his 40 years of experience and his statesmanship to move America in a better direction.
Is there any chance? Look, I agree with you. I mean, even Chris Hayes on his show last night was saying the idea that where's the second term vision. So I think tonight we're going to hear it. But how about, do you think we might see a really bold one for domestic policies? Expanding, like I know he tried to expand Medicare with Build Back Better. It was stopped. But these are things like family leave, paid family leave was in Build Back Better, and Manchin and Sinema stopped it. But along those lines, really being aggressive in terms of what a second term Biden presidency would mean?
I think that's what he needs. I think he needs to say, look, we've done a lot of good work. I'm proud of it, but we've still got a lot of people in this country who can't afford rent, who can't afford medicine, who can't afford dental and hearing. And we've got a lot of work to do in a country where the 17 richest people own more than the bottom 50%, and the top 1% have 10 times more than the bottom 50%. And here's my agenda. That has to be the vision. And I think these are times that called for bold vision. Look, I'm against junk fees, but we got to get more than ending junk fees. That's sort of Clintonian politics. We've got to offer structural change that people want in this country.
We need healthcare for all. We need an expanded Supreme Court. There's a lot of things we need. And, I talked to Senator Sanders a couple of weeks ago. We joked about it, that whole idea. This is what we need. He goes, yeah, I've heard of those things. So, well, Congressman Khanna, it's great having you back on. And again, thank you for your strong voice about Palestinian humanity, as well as security for the Israeli people. In the old days, we would just hear Israeli for the security for the Israelis, nothing about the Palestinians. Our hearts can be big enough to support humanity for both people. And it's about time, though, that Democrats are speaking about Palestinian humanity.
Absolutely, Dean. Not just our hearts, but our minds, because it's in America's strategic interest to have peace in 2 states in that region.
I agree. Thanks, Congressman. Nice chatting. Have a great day.